In this lecture, we're going to be learning about contrast and how to create contrast in our artwork. Now, contrast is incredibly important when it comes to digital painting because it really helps embellish your work and it just makes it look beautiful. The more contrast we can create, the better. And we can create contrast with everything from texture to color to values. So contrast is just anytime there's two things that are basically opposite next to each other. So black and white, rough and smooth textures, or even colors. So complementary colors that are right next to each other, that creates contrast. And it isn't always things like black and white. Sometimes it can just be a dark gray next to a light gray. That is also contrast. It's less contrast than black and white, but it's still contrast. So right here, I have this drawing of this character. We used her before, but we're going to use her again for this lecture. Go ahead and download this Photoshop file from the resources. It's a little bit different. The color of her line drawing is a little bit more red, and I got rid of all the other parts of the file, so it's just the line drawing in a white background. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to start choosing colors and values for her, and I'm going to walk you through the process that I use to choose my colors and values. So first, let's go ahead and start with, let's say, her skin tone. So we can always change these colors, so don't feel like once you add them in that they have to stay forever. So I'm going to come into my orange colors, maybe a little bit down towards the red, and I'm going to put my color picker somewhere right about there. I think that'll be good. And maybe I could desaturate that and bring it up a little bit more so it's a little bit brighter. I think something like that looks good. And I'm going to start just by coloring in all of her skin. Now, the reason why I'm doing the skin first is because it's going to make it easier to just draw the hair, the eyebrows, the eyes, all of that, add in all the color on top of this. So I can overshoot her face a little bit. And then I can just color over those parts that I overshot with whatever. So for example, up here in the hair, I can just go ahead and fill that in with whatever the hair color is going to be. All right, so now that we have our skin tone down, let's go ahead and base everything off of this. So we want the face to be the focal point, and more specifically, we want the eyes to be the focal point. So let's go ahead and let's start working on the eye. So first, let's go ahead and create the white of the eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same color and I'm just going to drag it more towards the white. So I'm not going to go completely to the white, but pretty dang close. Right about there should be good. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill in the white of the eyes like that. Do the same thing over here. Just like that. All right, great. Next, let's go ahead and decide on the color of the eyes. So let's make these eyes contrast quite a bit. They're already pretty contrasting because they have the thickest lines in the drawing and it's pretty dark in that area. But we can contrast even more by making the eyes dark, and not just making them dark, but maybe making them a little bit slightly a more complementary color. So if we're using warmer colors like this reddish pink color for the skin, then let's go ahead and let's kind of go to the opposite side of the color spectrum. So let's come over here into the blue area and let's go ahead and let's get a nice dark blue. And we can kind of saturate that. We'll put it about in the middle of the saturation. We want to keep this painting pretty desaturated. That's the style I'm going to go for, is more desaturated colors. So I'm going to put it right about there. Let's see how that looks. It might not look good, but let's experiment. It actually looks kind of cool. Maybe I'll drag it down a little bit more towards my greens. Let's try that. All right, great. I think that color looks pretty cool. So let's give that a shot. All right, next, let's go ahead and let's decide what color we want the hair to be. So I want the hair to actually be red, I think. I think red will be kind of a nice color. So I'm going to go ahead, drag this down into my reds, and I'm going to grab a red from, let's say right about here. We want it to be quite a bit darker than the skin tone because we want to create that contrast. So we have contrast in the eyes because it's a darker value and it's a complementary color to the skin tone. And so now the red, since it's going to be touching up against the skin tone, we don't necessarily always have to use a complementary color. So in this case, we're using a red sort of color, which is not complementary because it's already red. It's more of a monochromatic choice. But we are going darker. So as you can see, it creates that contrast between the face and the hair because it's a darker value. Let me show you something real quick. If I were to select the skin tone, and then let's say I brought this down into more of the red, so we get a little bit more of a red color, and I paint right next to it, if I were to make her hair that color, it wouldn't look very good because as you can see, it's the exact same value. It doesn't stand out enough. We would want to darken that just a slight bit. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. I'm going to come back to my red color. I'm going to go ahead and just fill in all of her hair with this color. I think this is a pretty good choice. All right, perfect. There we go. So we just added the color to the hair. That looks pretty good. Next, let's move on to her clothing. So her clothing, let's make this not just a complementary color, but also a darker color than her skin tone, because it's touching up against the skin tone. It's also touching up against the hair. So let's go ahead and make sure that it's darker than both the skin tone and the hair. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stick to the value of my red hair for now, and I'll go ahead and change that in a second. I'm going to drag this up into my bluish green area, sort of my turquoise area. I'm just going to drag this down and darken it a bit. So somewhere right about there should be good. And I'm also going to desaturate it a little bit. Then I'm going to go ahead. That looks pretty good. Maybe I'll desaturate that a little bit more. Bring it more up into my blues. All right, great. Now I'll go ahead and paint this in. Actually, looking at this, I think I want it to be a little bit more green. So I'll drag that more into my green, see how that looks. I think that looks a little bit better, making it a little bit more green. And then I'm just going to fill this in. Great, so there we go. Now, another thing we could do to create a little bit more contrast in the focal point is we can go ahead and select this green in her eye. Let's go ahead and drag that up, make it a little bit brighter, maybe desaturate it a little bit. And then we can go ahead and let's paint in a little bit more of a highlight down here at the bottom of the eye. It's just kind of like that. We'll do the same thing over here on this side. And then we can also go ahead and add a layer above our line drawing. Let's go ahead and grab a really light blue version of this, and we can add a little highlight in there. See how that looks. Do one there, do one there. Just kind of two little lines, keeping it nice and simple. Zoom out and see how that looks. Pretty good. All right, now lastly, let's go ahead and let's add in a background. So I'm going to come down to my background layer, and let's select more of a blue color, and let's really desaturate that. I'm going to select my green sweater as a base, and then I'm going to darken that a little bit over here on my color tray. So that way it's darker than my sweater and it's also darker than the hair. And I'm also going to desaturate it quite a bit. So put it somewhere right about there. And I'm going to drag that up into my deep blues. So something like that should be good. Then using my brush on my background layer, I'm going to go ahead and just paint in a little bit of a blue background just to make my character stand out a little bit more. Maybe I'll just do some sort of a circle shape like this. Something like that. And then I can go ahead and just grab all this and drag it downwards a little bit. Unlock that background layer and try that again. So I'll drag it down a little bit just so it's more in the center of the page. And on my background layer, I can just go ahead and fill in this transparent area that we missed over here. You got to reselect that background layer, and then we can fill that in. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and zoom out, see how that looks. It looks pretty cool. Honestly, I think that blue background could be a little bit darker just to make our character stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and reselect that blue, darken it a little bit, and I'll go ahead and fill that in. Great. Okay, so real quick, let's just do a quick review. So when it comes to creating contrast with colors and values, what you want to do is you want to start with something as a base. So her skin, for example, was the base. Once we had her skin in there, then we knew what should be dark and what should be light. So basically, the next thing that was touching the skin was the hair. So we made the hair a little bit darker. So there's some value contrast between the two. And then we also had the sweater, which was touching the hair. So we wanted to create some contrast between those two. And so we made the sweater a little bit darker than the actual skin tone. And we probably could have actually made the sweater a little bit darker than the hair. But overall, we have some pretty good value contrast, and we also have some pretty good color contrast because the skin tone is a warmer color and the sweater is a cooler color. It's more of a green. And then the background is contrasting with the hair because the background is slightly blue and the hair is red, which are opposites. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.